So these sessions are Regenerative Finance Labs. And for those of you who were with us 2 weeks ago, you'll remember that we introduced the Earth Regeneration Fund, and we talked about the amazing encounter that we had in Toronto with representatives of 5 bioregions. And interestingly, Natalia was only partly there via Zoom because the Canadian government thinks all Colombians are trying to sneak into their country. They don't know it's actually a much better life in Colombia. They don't know that. We don't need them to know that, because otherwise, the US elections would cause a bunch of US people to take refuge in Colombia. And I'm not sure that's a good idea. But I'm really glad Natalia is here today, because what I want to do today is bring us into a specific real world challenge that we're dealing with in Barichara that is related to regenerative finance. And that is related to a project that Natalia has been leading, which means I'd like for her to be able to speak about it herself. And so just to set a little bit of context for what we talked about 2 weeks ago, as we're creating this narrative that works at multiple levels. And so the narrative can work at the level of a local regenerative project, or something like a functional landscape, so to regenerate a watershed, for example, up to a territory or a bioregion, and then all the way up to continents and the planet. And that we want to have a way of telling stories at all levels that support each other. So we could say, oh, if someone wanted to support regeneration around the world, they could give money to the Earth Regeneration Fund, and it would be dispersed among the bioregions that are participating. Or they could say, well, in the Earth Regeneration Fund, I really care about the Ogallala Aquifer in the high plains of North America. And we would say, well, you should just pass money directly through to Ogallala Life and the work that they're doing in the Panhandle of Texas. So the idea would be that people can basically tell stories at different levels, and they all support each other. And what's interesting is today, Natalia and I are going to tell a story about something that we're doing in Barichara. And then in an hour and a half, another design school member, Chris Dio, is going to do a theme dialogue on the same topic we're going to talk about today, which he had already had planned before, and I didn't really intend to double book us this way. But he's going to be talking about how you can use advanced computation and data analytics to dive into multi-layered data sets and then inform ranchers on the high plains of North America on how they could regenerate their landscapes based on those data sets, which is pretty cool. And it's something because many of you may not know that Chris worked at places like Lawrence Livermore, some of the most advanced computing centers on Earth. And he's a super nerd. He's just really, really approachable. He's a very nice guy. And so he's going to tell us some of the things he's been thinking about. What we're going to do today is share with you something that happened in Barichara and something we're trying to do. And I want to draw attention to 2 parts of the story that we're going to tell. But first, the agenda. The agenda is that I'm going to give a short presentation to set some context, and then I'm going to ask Natalia to speak, because the proposal I'm going to be describing, she actually developed with another partner here in Barichara named Wandaza. And so she knows a lot more about its details than I do. But I wanted to sort of set the larger context as it relates to the design school, then pass it over to her to speak, and then we can have a discussion. Because the story I'm going to tell is about an amazing idea that should be funded. How often does this happen, right? But this amazing idea, and it really should be funded. We created the idea because a funder asked us to apply, and then they rejected us, and they had no capacity for reciprocity. We didn't have the healthy relationships in place. So now we don't really know what to do with this great idea. Like, we don't know who's going to fund it and how we'll build the relationships. So there's a question about building relationships and regenerative flow that is going to be in a challenge that I think will be familiar to all of us. We've all experienced something like this, and it relates to all of our landscapes. So that's kind of the idea. And the other thing I want to share is that Penny and I had a fantastic conversation with Steve Melville and with Carrie Norton the other day. And it's part of a larger process we're starting for the finance labs, where we're going to begin to have different kinds of content. So we're going to have case studies like what we're doing today. We're going to have sort of general overviews of topics we might care about, like the Earth Regeneration Fund 2 weeks ago. And we're going to have specific tools and frameworks and facilitation on things that we all care about with different expertise from the design school. And so we had previously talked with Steve and Carrie about things that they wanted to bring into the design school that they're working on. And we said, well, the great place to start would be within the finance lab. And so just so you know, we're going to start creating this weaving of different people leading and facilitating and sort of balancing between what Penny and I lead and what other people lead so that this really can be a lab, a place that we experiment and learn together and that we practice together. So I just wanted to share that so that you'd know we're trying to do something big here. We're just taking small steps. And so with that in mind, are there any questions about the agenda or should we just jump in? Yeah, let's just do it. Okay, then I'm going to start the presentation part. And the way that I want to tell this story is around first, what is our purpose? Our purpose is to restore the rivers in Barichara. As many of you know, there's widespread deforestation and degradation of the landscapes in our territory, that the majority of the native forest has been destroyed. And while some trees have been planted again, they're mostly just like tree plantations and not forest. And our rivers are either dry or they're so contaminated that almost nothing lives in them. So basically the rivers of the Barichara territory are mostly dead. And there's a lot of work to be done in restoring the rivers. And what I want to share with you is how we want to restore the rivers by building a geospatial data commons. And so I want to talk about what that is and how it relates to bioregional learning and to territorial governance and to financial flow. So that's the idea, is how are we developing a framework for restoring the rivers of Barichara in a way that uses geospatial data, or data that is reference to the geography of our landscape with the tools of geographic information systems and mapping. And so the first thing I want to do is just remind us that this is what the territory around Barichara looks like. If you look over here in that sort of left middle upper area, you'll see this little grid in this part that looks like a set of grid lines. That's the town of Barichara. And what you can see all around it is a lot of yellow and brown and basically things that are not dark green, because this plateau that Barichara sits on has been mostly deforested. And the water that used to flow continuously in this territory until the mid-1970s, and in some places up until the early 1990s, has become intermittent flows, or it only flows for 2 hours after it rains, and then no more. So basically, there's no water flowing in this landscape, or very, very little. And one of the problems we have is that there are a lot of stories that people tell about what the water in Barichara, and no one can figure out what the hell's going on. Some people will say, well, there's groundwater, and if we just dig enough deep wells, we can just get the water and we're fine. And other people say, well, the weather patterns are changing and we can't really tell when it's going to rain. And then other people say, well, we are doing reforestation and it's getting better. And other people say, well, we keep destroying the forest and it's getting worse. And the thing is that no one can really get a straight answer because we don't have the ground truth data sets in real time that tell us what's going on in our landscape. And so all of these different stories are out there. And as people are trying to organize around restoring the rivers, they just enter into a confusing mess in the culture. And it's really, really hard to organize us without stories that are consistent with each other and consistent with reality. So this is a really big challenge for us in Barichara. And so if you look at something like this is my crude attempt at drawing the drainage basin for the Barichara River, which I just did with a Google Earth image and drawing an irregular form in keynote presentation. But if you just look at this area in blue and say that's basically the drainage of the Barichara River, and I ask, well, what's really going on there? Who is managing land in different ways? Who is trying to restore the water? Who's engaging in reforestation? Who's doing education work? What's really happening? How many people are just cutting down trees to build another hotel with swimming pools, even though the local people don't have water? How many more people are building houses in places where there's no permanent water supply? So the question of what is really happening and who is doing something about it depends on data. It depends on having good quality information. And right now, people like Natalia and myself, we have better answers to these questions than most people in the territory do, because we work with different people on this theme of water, but even we don't know enough to be able to manage it. And we're like the closest to experts that you can find is people who are approaching these questions the way that we are. And so one of the things that we talked about back during the learning journey on bioregional learning centers was that we need to think about how information leads to collective intelligence. And so one of the things that we talked about then, this was several months ago, was that ecosystems gain a mind, meaning they gain the ability for intelligence through the living interactions of information that is being processed at the scale of entire landscapes. What do I mean by this? I mean that the way that water flows across the land after a rainfall is information. The way that water infiltrates into the groundwater supply is information. The way that we look at the connectivity for migration of mammals is information. The way that we build houses and where we build them is information. And so this processing of information by the landscape is something that nature does ecologically all the time. But we human beings can be pretty dumb about it, meaning we have to actually create our own information systems to be able to understand what's happening in a landscape. And if we were to talk about this in terms of creating something that we manage together, a commons, that what we need for restoring the rivers in Barichara is we need an information commons. I'm not going to go into all the details of what a commons is. I just want to say that it's something that we manage collectively. And so if we're going to collectively manage a watershed, we need good quality information that's shared among all of the actors who are collectively managing that watershed. So we need to create information commons to inform our decisions. And we need those information commons to be robust, to be accurate, to be updated. We need to add information when we have new questions. If we have a new question, we may not have the data we need, so we need to go and get the data. So this question of an information commons is the basis on which we make effective decisions. If we don't have the ability to know what's going on, we don't know how to set priorities, we don't know what is working, we don't know what is not working. So this information commons is just core. It's super, super important. So, as we said before in the learning journey earlier this year, a bioregional learning center, which is an ecosystem of learning for a territory to be able to regenerate itself, has a couple of key elements. One of them is that there are different learning processes spread across the territory. And those learning processes represent information, which means a bioregional learning center, which is an ecosystem of learning processes, has underneath it a bioregional information commons, which is if you don't create this collective information that's collectively managed, you don't have collective learning. And if you don't have collective learning, how can you shape and guide and direct regeneration at a bioregional scale? So the bioregional information commons is fundamental to creating a bioregional learning center. This is an insight that Natalia took to say the way that we're going to build our bioregional learning center in Barichara is to create a geospatial information commons. So it works like this, and this is what Natalia will speak a little bit more about, which is that we need to create a geo portal, or you could say a geospatial portal, or a portal of geo-referenced information that's organized geographically for Barichara. And we want to do this with three key elements. One is that we want geospatial data for the territory, things like where's their vegetative cover, how does water move across the land, what are the different soil types, this kind of geospatial data. Another thing is that we need to have a mapping team for the land system. We need people who are experts in this kind of mapping, who can create the data sets and who can build them in a way that gives us these holistic insights about our territory. But we don't want that mapping team to be separate from what's going on in the territory. So the other thing we need to do is map out the social actors working on water issues. Within any specific watershed, who is trying to restore that watershed? And we need this land system mapping team to work with those social actors. So what that means is we need to facilitate and convene mapping teams and social actors who are working on water to gather the right kind of data to make decisions for those social actors to collaborate with each other. And that's what the geoportal for Barichara would do. This creates two fundamental capacities. One, it lets us create prototypes for community governance of our watersheds. So if you take one of our watersheds, identify who is working on water issues in that watershed, and partner them to a landscape mapping team that can create geospatial data sets for them that are directly answering the questions they're asking, then they can start to make decisions based on that information, and that is a prototype of governance for the watershed. So this geoportal is a way of getting to community governance. The other thing it does is it creates knowledge commons in plural, different kinds of knowledge commons for creating a bioregional learning center. So the way to create the bioregional learning center includes creating this mapping information, forming this land system mapping team, and creating collaboration frameworks for those people who are working on water, and having all of that become open source information for the territory, a commons of information for everyone who cares about water for the territory. And now you start to see how important this geoportal is for everything we're doing in the territory. So here's the funny thing that happened. I'm not going to name where this $100,000 opportunity came from, but I'm just going to say there was a team that had funding that wanted to give $100,000 to different regenerative projects, and there needed to be a technology component. And they reached out to me 3 different times saying, please, please have Barichara apply. We really want you to be part of the projects that we're supporting. And we're like, oh, okay, we will. And then we applied and we created these beautiful ideas. The idea of the geoportal I just shared with you. These fantastic ideas. And then that funder said, you're one of the finalists and you'll know this weekend and you have one of the strongest applications. So what happened next? They rejected us. And since then, it's been crickets. We haven't heard a single thing from them. They're just like, they found their champion horse for their horse race and they forgot about everyone else. Well, Penny and I have been doing a lot of work on reciprocity relationships for regenerative finance. And what we observed here is that there is not reciprocity with this funder. This funder invited us to apply. We did a bunch of work. We created a beautiful proposal. They said, we're very likely to get it. And then they just dropped us like a bad check. Now, I don't think any of this is intentional. This is so typical in the philanthropic world for people to not form healthy relationships and to burn bridges. They basically treated us badly by inviting us into this relationship, dancing with us a little bit, getting our hopes up, and then leaving us. Think of it in terms of dating. If there's someone that's like, hey, you want to go on a date? And you're like, oh, I like this person. Oh, they're being really nice. This might go well. Maybe I'll get a kiss. Oh, they just said goodbye. I've got another boyfriend. And you're like, what happened? What? You see, like the basic health of the relationship isn't there. And as we know, you cannot have regenerative flows among actors and investors without reciprocity. You need trust, you need alignment, you need long-term relationships. And so we realized that the way that we were invited to apply for this funding seemed really promising, but it lacked reciprocity. So a design question for us is, how do we cultivate the reciprocity to attract a different $100,000 opportunity to enable these beautiful ideas to be manifested in our community? And now you can see we're going back and learning from what we did to move it forward. And this is the Regenerative Finance Challenge that I'm bringing to us today. And so how does this relate to the Earth Regeneration Fund and what we're doing here in this finance lab? Well, remember that the Earth Regeneration Fund is made up of 2 things: a web of relationships and a powerful story with the value flows among them. And you can see the same thing that I just showed you. There was a powerful story about this geoportal in Barichara, a web of relationships that attempted to have value flow but did not succeed at having value flow, and so it failed. But because the Earth Regeneration Fund is a collaboration between different bioregions, this bioregion in the lower right, which is the Northern Andes in Colombia, can partner with funders or partners of different kinds in the forest of the Northeast, in the Ogallala Aquifer and Cascadia, or any other bioregion associated with the Earth Regeneration Fund. And we might find a reciprocity relationship with other funders who could learn from what we're doing to help them solve problems where they are. And so now what we need to do is cultivate a different web of relationships with the powerful story of Barichara's geoportal to create the value flows that actually are regenerative finance. So that's how this relates to the Earth Regeneration Fund. And so now I just want to name quickly that Natalia, who's here on the left, by the way, the woman there in the purple shirt is Mariana. It's her birthday. But she's happening in this picture I found of Natalia. And this lovely bald man on the right, Juan. Juan Daza is an incredibly innovative person who works on open collaboration. He does things like sociocracy and Theory U. And anyway, Juan is super cool. And Natalia and Juan got together and created a proposal. And with their beautiful ideas, they created an amazing proposal. But now the question is, what do we do with it? And to answer that, what I want to do is invite Natalia to share a little bit of like, what were you thinking? How did you come up with this? What are some of the elements of this proposal? What are you learning from our experience so far? And then the rest of us, what I want us to be ready to do is ask Natalia questions and then start trying to design the better web of relationships for this to work in the future. We basically decided we need to get this project funded because it's so important to our work. And we just wanted to bring that challenge directly into this space. And so with that, I just want to pass it over to you, Natalia. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Hello, everybody. Joe, maybe can you share again your screen with the presentation with the one of your, in the slide you described the geoportal?
Yep, just a second.
Yeah. Yeah, that one. Yeah, I guess you mentioned almost all the details of what we were dreaming about the geoportal. And this is a good example of what we were expecting. We are dreaming in having a geoportal system where we can mix different types of data. So one is the geospatial data for the territory that, and we're currently gathering the information about the hydrological situation, the use of the land, vegetation coverage, forests that remains in the territory. We are also getting data from the laws that determine the use of the land in the territory. And Joe also mentioned the importance of that regarding how we are making decisions and what are the narratives that are dominant in the territory regarding water, regarding the use of land, and how people relates to the land. Here in Barichara, the most precious resource is land, and people is relating with land as a resource for taking advantage and subdividing land and selling in very expensive prices to increase their level of income. And the thing is that in the way land has been subdivided, we are walking to an unfeasible way of occupying the territory and relating to the territory, and Barichara might become, and how you say inviable, Joe, for everyone? Like Barichara is becoming a place that in 10 years, we won't be able to live here if the current trend of occupying and using the land remains.
Yeah, it will become unlivable.
Yeah. So the idea of this geoportal is providing a data that is real on what's happening in the territory. Currently, we are creating a map with the rivers, and on top all the new license of construction in the rural areas, to be able to show where is the concentration of the buildings, of the new buildings that will come up, and how that relates with the use and the management of water, for example. So our idea is to bring this information to the community and to the authorities, so we start to create new narratives, emergent narratives for the territory that are based with real data and that can inform decisions in real data and not in the narratives that are built just because gossiping or creations or culture or just stories that gets into the current culture and are not driving us to a sustainable way of living in the territory. So our idea is to create this, to gather this data, to gather also a monitoring system, to establish in the geoportal a monitoring system linked to the 4 thematic areas of the foundation, so we can monitor what the regenerative processes are doing linked to the 4 thematic areas that we are collaborating with. That means environmental regeneration, education, sorry, my English is completely stuck today, but regenerative culture and territorial healing, regenerative education, environmental regeneration, and regenerative economics. And the idea is to gather, to create a monitoring system for the regeneration of the territory, and being able to show the contributions that the different processes are doing towards the regeneration and how that is generating impact on the natural resources and on the landscape and on the water. And the third level of information that we want to start to include in this geoportal are the emergent narratives. For example, emerging stories around water, stewardship, and governance, where there are new agreements among community groups, what are the new rules from the government that might emerge based on this data. And the idea is that this information, as Joe mentioned, is for public use. So the idea is that the different groups that are working in processes might use this to make, to do policy influence, to influence the new territorial planning system at the municipalities, to create new relations with institutions, government, and different groups. So more or less, that's the idea. I don't know, Joe, if you want me to add something that might be meaningful for this group.
Then I could put in here.
You want to ask a question first?
Yeah,
Go.
I could just add it
Yeah,
in.
go ahead.
So, Natalia, how would this relate to the groups that Emilce is leading with the talks of the territorial dialogues of the?
Yeah. The idea is that once we have this information and we have also mapped the regenerative processes, we want to bring this information to dialogues, territorial dialogues linked to the regenerative topics we're dealing with, and create like working groups within the community, so that these working groups can, based on this data, make decisions on how to move forward in the regenerative processes in the territory. So that's also the idea. And we aim also to influence the education processes within schools, and with some technology, we wanted to link up children and youth from school in contributing for georeferencing, how you say that, data that is not available in the websites, like names of rivers, where water springs, where are the pozos profundos?
Yeah, the deep wells.
The deep wells that most of them are illegal. Where are the places, the areas where the buildings are coming too close to the river streams? And the idea is to involve the communities, mainly youth and children, in monitor data and link this data to the geoportal to reinforce all the the environmental leadership of youth and children. So that's also something. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thanks, Natalia. And I'll just add one more thing, and then we can go to questions from anyone who's listening. So if anyone has questions, you could go ahead and raise your hand, and we can start a queue of people to ask questions or add comments. And I'll just share one thing that Natalia and I have already started doing is we look at specific places where we need to raise money to protect land. And then we start to gather the stories about what the neighbors are doing so that we can start to create ecological corridors based on reality of what people are doing in the territory. So there's an example of a piece of land that Natalia has been stewarding that if we raised about $40,000, we could pay for this land to become protected forest. And by itself, it's not a very large piece of land, but several of the neighbors are doing conservation work. So that piece of land becomes part of a larger pattern of relationships in the landscape. So to be able to do very specific storytelling around specific opportunities to connect different pieces of land, that's another element of this work, is to create regenerative projects around collaboration among neighbors within the landscape. So I just want to
just to add something that we are doing with that also is that currently we are mapping all the processes, organizations, and groups that are working with water in the territory. And we are mapping them geographically and connecting them thematically. So we're identifying what type of work they're doing towards water, who of them are working with watershed restoration, which of them are working with taking care of the water springs, which of them are working with distribution of water and sorry, my English is very bad today. And we're mapping these and categorizing that so people can graphically can see them in relation to other people who's working in water issues. And our aim with that is to have a big workshop with all these organizations so they start to realize who is doing what and where and how they can complement to each other or how they can collaborate. So yeah, we expect to finish this mapping this year. And at the beginning, early in the next year, we're planning this big workshop. And the idea for that is moving forward towards a common agenda around water. So that's, yeah, that's something additional we're linking to this geoportal.
Yeah, thank you so much, Natalia, for sharing more of the story. And I'm just curious if there are any questions or comments. I see Marie has her hand up. So Marie, please, welcome.
Would you on? Yes. What I needed to know is how, what do you need the money exactly for? Because listening to Joe and then listening to you, I got the idea that you're already a great deal of the way there. So what was the money needed exactly for? Is it to actually create and have somebody paid for maintaining the platform? Because it seems that the data collection and all the coordination between the actors, the social actors, and all that, that is already happening. You're already doing it.
Yeah, that's a very good question. We got some money from the Nobel Foundation, and we're investing that money in getting the license to RGs and land viewer license. And those licenses have a yearly cost. So we have, until December, we have budgeted the license. No, sorry, until July, we have the license budgeted. We have an environmental engineer team until December. So that's why we're gathering all the information, the maps, the basic maps. But we need to keep sponsoring this team, to complement that team with the communication team, to be able to place this information in a way that is usable for the community in general, not just for experts in the geoportal, but
outreach.
Yeah, that is reachable and understandable by the community. So we need to sponsor also that team. We don't have money for that team. And we also need some money to create an interface between the community and the geoportal through intelligent mobiles, so we can provide the kits with mobiles to add georeference.
In real time, yeah, in real time. What's happening in real time now? I can send it to you. Yeah, okay.
So they can contribute to add information that is relevant to the geoportal.
Right.
And we were aiming to get a high-tech drone.
Yeah.
The drone. So to be able to update some information that is not updated in the latest satellite images that we managed to get from the website. Buying satellite images is very expensive. Like it was about 500,000 US for just one image that was fully updated.
So 50,000.
50,000. So as our territory is not so big, we can update information with land viewer and also with a very good drone. So that was the money we were looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Marie. And over to Karen, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I am so grateful for these conversations. They really stimulate me in the ways that I'm thinking. And I wanted, so I'm going to just talk a little bit in response to these ideas to kind of integrate for myself and share my kind of thought journey on this. And I recently, Sunday, I had an event in Milwaukee called Regenerate MKE, a street fair, because I'm perceiving that in terms of regenerating the watershed here in Milwaukee on the Great Lakes, that's that's not, we've got fantastic organizations that are doing things like that. We've got the Milwaukee River Keeper and all of these different Great Lakes organizations that are focused on that. And I'm very, so I'm trying to figure out where my skill sets plug in. And with my teaching background and the community organizing, getting a community level understanding of this, and also the nonprofit ecosystem in Milwaukee to be thinking in these ways, because there isn't a kind of we're so privileged, we don't really have a crisis mindset with urgency the way that I'd like to see. And so I just want to take a moment to connect. I'm reading a book called Big Hunger, The Unholy Alliance Between Corporate America and Anti-Hunger Groups. And it's kind of talking about how the nonprofit industrial complex is so kludged with collusion and self-protection that we are not fulfilling the missions of what we need to do. And in the local food world that I've been navigating, I'm realizing, you know, like we keep doing the work, but we don't actually want to solve the problem, because that puts us out of business, and we all have mortgages. And so we are competing against each other in this environment. And what I'm viewing today is helping me realize that this data-informed decision-making and the information commons that you were just talking about. Yesterday, I spent the day at Data Day, which there were 400 of us in Milwaukee talking about data you can use, and using, kind of publicly available data sets for decision-making, working towards social justice and things like that. And so instead of competing for funds, I'm proposing, or I'm hatching this idea about cooperating for funds, using this, these ideas to help organize, basically lovingly blow up our nonprofit ecosystem, and to think about like the cooperative principle of cooperation among cooperatives, to start organizing nonprofits that actually want to get some shit done, to organize around what I did was the permaculture principles, and kind of get people to think about relationality and accountability again, so that we can start doing that. So now coordination, sharing, cooperating, amplifying regenerative just transition solutions that are happening, and then kind of reverse the grant process to just make money available to people doing good things. So tell us what you want to do, and we figure out a way to fund it, because I have grant writing skills, and I kind of want to be selective in terms of, like, I want to make sure they're going towards this. So I'm really excited about this. I know I've been speaking a long time. I could talk longer, but thank you.
Well, I just wanted to add a comment about what you were just saying, Karen, about turning the direction around. So instead of there's a funding opportunity, how do you shape whatever you're trying to do to what a funder is willing to pay? That's how it's normally done. To just assuming, or rather inserting, the truth is the people doing the work on the ground know better than you do if you're the funder. Like what Natalia just said, the people organizing around water know what needs to be done. Yes, we need better data to inform it, but they actually know better than some, foundation in the Netherlands or something, right? Like, so the idea that we need to shape what we're doing to someone's funding agenda is the backwards way of doing the logic. It actually doesn't make sense. What does make sense is to build trust, where there's a shared understanding of our purpose and our intentions, and where we have shared purpose and shared intentions, we trust that the people who are trying to do the work are going to do it the best they can. Now, we should still have monitoring. There should still be evaluation. We don't get rid of that. That's part of the trust. But if people in Barichara say, we need $100,000 to do this, and it'll change the way we're managing water. Well, if someone wants to change the way that water is being managed, do it the way that the local people are organizing it. That's a lesson we could apply to any landscape. So I just wanted to really, really emphasize the importance of restoring sovereignty to the local people doing the work. And that's part of the reciprocity relationships with funders. So I just wanted to really add that part in. And now I see that John's got his hand up, followed by Pat. So awesome, we have more. So John, come on in.
Yeah, so on that note, we've got exactly that principle, but at the same time, because we're trying to pull governments along with us, both local and central government in Britain. We're on the Thames River in Britain. There's a strong drive in Europe and everywhere, but with the decarbonisation strategy and transitioning. So to do the same thing you're talking about, we're dealing with water issues, but we're also dealing with energy issues. And this time last year, I just decided we're going to go for a particular funding pot that central government was throwing out to try and encourage people to come in with different models for renewables infrastructure. So I threw this grant presentation in and said, look, we want community infrastructure community-owned infrastructure at scale on the Thames, in the Thames Valley, that we've been working on for 3 years. But we wanted to align it with central government funding. This was with the Tories. And we presented this whole thing that we've got a whole watershed in which we're linking up these communities anyway, 30,000 residents. But we also then want to link in this entire watershed and all the residents with the renewables infrastructure opportunity with solar. So that's what we did. We submitted it, and we were given the funding for about $100,000 in about 3 months ago. On the back of that, because we had that validation from government, we were then required to put tenders out to bring other companies in. So we got the likes of Over Arab, which is a huge engineering company across the world. But they came back to us and said, we're really interested. They validated this community model that everybody else is ignoring, but they see the potential and opportunity in it. So I just wanted to say that going down that route about going straight to community, absolutely. But we're also trying to do it and drag the others across with us and seek that validation, which then benefits the communities at the same time. And I think that's quite intriguing, because that's trying to pull government funding onto something that they're not convinced about community ownership of assets, whether it's water or energy, whatever it is. They're not convinced about it, but they've put just enough in for us to be able to then explore it with large engineering companies. And our intention then is, and the stress is, then to make it work. So it's quite an intriguing opportunity, and it's something I have to say that I would like to put out there with the design lab, because to be able to focus around it as an opportunity to explore what community ownership of assets at scale is, both in Europe and in the States. So it's quite exciting. I just thought that might help the discussion.
Yeah, I'll just add one comment that something that is happening here in Barichara is creating community aqueducts, where local people have started organizing around watershed. Not enough of it, but there are a couple of examples in our territory. And I think it's really important for this kind of, like you said, these small scale demonstrations that then build validity of the approach. So I think that's a very smart strategy. So thanks for that, John. And then over to you, Pat.
Yeah, I'm going to share this video today and this information with a major steward on our watershed, with some organizations that I've been involved in more of the urban area. People still seem to be in their silos, and it's all about coming out and getting together. I don't want to take any more time, but what I want to say is that I would like to suggest, I know Beans is watching, I think he's in this, I saw him. If he would get together with you, Joe, and Karen, he gave a talk to us in our hub meeting on Tuesday about his own. He seems to be able to get funding, and he's in the crypto world, which I don't understand. But you, Joe, know about it, and Karen, this idea of cooperating for funds. Anyway, I'm suggesting that you guys get together. And because if Beans talks now, Beans has so much to say, he will talk for 2 hours. And I know we have other people who want to say things. So I just want to put that out there for you guys.
You gave me the perfect opportunity to promote the BioFi Pathfinders Gitcoin round that the design school is one of the hosts for, and that started 2 days ago. We identified 14 bioregional organizing groups, places where people are organizing bioregionally. And it was an invitation-only funding round with $55,000 in matching funds. And Barichara is one of those participants. So are the Greater Takaranto bioregion, Cascadia, and Forest of the Northeast from the design school, as well as the Diamante bioregional group in Costa Rica, Refi Uganda in Uganda, and many others. And what we're doing is helping create a framework of collaboration that includes interviewing leaders from the different bioregions to have material to present to other funders, so that the connections that the BioFi project has, that we have, that Open Civics has, that people in the refi world have, that they can promote all of our bioregions to other funders, and then bring funders to us who are interested in what we're doing in our bioregions. Because one of the criteria for the Gitcoin round was each bioregion needed to tell the story of what they're doing in a brief, accessible, and inspiring way. So now you can go to the Gitcoin, the page of these 14 different projects, and read about what's going on in Costa Rica, and read about what's going on in South Africa, and read about what's going on in Sicily, and read about what's going on in Barichara. And so this way of organizing ourselves where we do collective storytelling, I think is really powerful, and we're just getting started. So just to really agree with you, like we're just getting started. So thank you so much for that, Pat. And then I see Marie's got her hand up. So Marie, over to you.
Just a quick story that also speaks to that whole reversing the direction of the funding. I did an application with the French aid bodies, there's a whole group of them, but mainly it's the French government behind it, for somebody in Senegal this year. And it was a devilishly complex form, honestly. It was like incredibly intellectual. And I just struggled with it, and I managed to make an application, well knowing that the central problem, which became apparent talking to my Senegalese partner, that was that the way the French government was viewing the issue was entirely different from and opposite from the one that the Senegalese man living on the ground was. And the whole ground was about supporting the spread of markets, local markets, to market good organic food in Senegal, and to balance out the influence of the great supermarkets that are coming from France and have completely taken over the distribution of food locally. And there are some laws in Senegal that a supermarket should not be within a certain amount of kilometers from local markets and all that. So there's some very weak attempts by the local government to try to stop the situation from getting worse. So that aid organization, that the French government, through a couple of aid organizations that they sponsor, were taking advice from a great coalition of all the farmers of the West African area, that includes Ghana in this case, because there's a couple of ex-British colonies. And they were responding to that, saying, okay, we are going to help local food economy with these grants, but their focus was so small. They just wanted something very, very precise, like where are going to be the actual places where you're going to sell the food, and how they're going to be, organized and all that. The farmers that I spoke, that my friend had already organized in Senegal, what they wanted was something entirely different. They wanted to be given money to buy a whole network of land pieces, have a well on each of them, so they would have security for producing food all year round, and have this distribution network, and have possibility of influencing the way the whole sale process would then proceed, and especially how everything would be packaged. So they wanted full control or influence and agency over the entire process, from owning the land all the way to selling the food. The French government was completely incapable of doing that. On top of that, I'm sure it would create an enormous contradiction because the French government is also encouraging supermarkets to be there, right? So it just intrinsically could not work. However, this is my last bit of this story. When we placed the application, I fully knew that it wasn't good enough because the complexities involved in the actual paperwork was such that you really need a whole team of specialized people to actually achieve it. So I knew we would never get it. However, it came to a person to review who was African. And that person, although he's based in Paris, answered personally saying, these are the things that are missing. Try again next year and I will look at it personally. So that's what I wanted to say, is that sometimes, and I've found that with the NHS and social services in England as well, sometimes all it takes is finding the one person who has understanding and who has agency and can make it happen for you.
Thank you for that, Marie. And I just want to say, we're going to go to Claire next, but then after Claire goes, I want to invite Frank Sanborn to have a conversation about what he is vigorously writing about in the chat. And Frank is a dear friend of mine, so I know that the depth of his knowledge goes way beyond what he's sharing there. So I just wanted to name that I'm going to invite Frank to come and share after Claire. Frank is a dear friend of mine from Seattle that we go way back, but we'll come to that in a moment. But first to you, Claire.
Thank you, and thanks for the sharing. This is, it feels really important what you're, both what you're sharing and the process that you're talking about. And I think the things that come to mind is that line, the land organizes the people, and for that to have power, it needs to be trustworthy. And I really appreciated what you were bringing in there. And I wanted to bring in, and it sort of touches a little bit maybe on what you were talking about, Marie, you know, growing up in South Africa. So I was a kid, I was just listening to conversations, and the dinner table had, my dad was a scientist, they had friends that were reporters, they were part of the anti-apartheid, but really imagining what the new South Africa could be like. But they were always sense-making, and they had people who really had access to a lot of information. And one of the things that I remember, one of the conversations that was coming up was just how detailed the information that the South African government had all the way up Africa, and how they basically, they understood the local tribal conflicts, some of the geopolitical stuff, the droughts, all of that. And they used that to exploit and to undermine democracies everywhere, and basically for their own project. And the thing that has always stuck with me about that is that like data sovereignty is so important. And as we're we need that detailed information, and at the same time, the knowledge that people use that for the most incredible evil. Sorry, not always evil, but like for their own greed or their own, but I mean, the apartheid government was like just the absolute face of evil, the stuff that they did. So then, Marie, what you were talking about, I've been sort of thinking about this, is that the thing that those systems have, which is basically the opposite of relationality, is where you have networks of trusted relationships, and people who have a relationship with the land. You can't just scale that up. It actually, to access those people, requires that you have trusted relationships to connect with them. And so to me, there's a piece here that if that data is also tied to that relationality, that there may be a way of like, how do we hold that story of place and have, I don't quite know, I'm just throwing the ideas in here, but it feels like there's something about that, and especially organizing the local landscapes. I just wanted to throw that in and to say how exciting it is that we're even having this conversation. So thank you. And thank you, Natalia, and Joe. amazing to see what you're doing and what we can learn from each other.
Thank you, Claire. And what I wanted to do is ask Frank if you could share a little bit. And so I know Frank has done a lot of work with what I might say is deploying the ability to create technology in disasters or in crisis situations. So it's not simply deploying technology. It's actually going in and helping create it appropriately to the place. And so there's a lot of nuance in Frank's experience with this. But Frank was commenting in the chat and some private messages to me about things he could do to help us with the citizen science and with the kids. And I was like, dude, this is so cool. Frank, could you just talk about that for a minute? So that's why I'm putting you on the spot, but I'd love to.
No, and I really appreciate that. And I didn't, as Joe knows, I'm more in the background of things than necessarily out in the world. And so this is me jumping out into the world a little bit. So my background, I was given the pleasure of becoming an innovation fellow with FEMA and Health and Human Services back in 2012 during the Obama administration. And 3 weeks into my fellowship, Hurricane Sandy hit, and I was asked to help lead a team with FEMA to go into New York and bring the resources to the people who are on the ground, take all the field notes, and be someone who could support the local people who were doing the thing that Claire is just talking about in an emergency situation. So my job was to go find everyone that was in a church or a building, and I brought in Wi-Fi communications and satellite communication to them. So we installed a satellite, created a Wi-Fi mesh network or a mesh network for people to be able to communicate. We opened up disaster recovery centers in IKEA. I helped deploy a mesh network in Red Hook, where we were able to cover 25% of the community, which had 14,000 members, in 3 days with free Wi-Fi, which still runs today. Red Hook did a door-to-door services program, homebound program, where they served 14,000 residents, and anyone who could not get out after disaster were brought 2 meals a day and any supplies they needed, and brought in the social network support into that. And so I have all of that information and how we can be able to use tools like Map Your Neighborhood to be able to prepare for these type of things beforehand. How do we identify people in our neighborhood? They did an amazing job. They knocked on 14,000 doors, and they provided support for months. It was they were still providing homebound support in February after the disaster, because many building Red Hook. So when the salt water came in, flood, everything, all the electrical systems.
Frank, your connection's cutting out for some reason. Frank, we're losing your connection for some reason. Can you hear me? For those who didn't catch it, he's talking about when Hurricane Sandy hit New York and New Jersey, and the water came in and flooded basically millions and millions of people in a place that no one thought there'd ever be a hurricane.
Thank you, Zach.
Frank, are you back? We lost you there.
Am I back?
Yeah, now you're back.
Awesome.
Or maybe the connection's still weak. Maybe turn off your video and see if we can hear your audio better.
Try that.
Ah, bummer. Well, while Frank's connection is weak, I'll just add that they ended up creating a group called the Field Innovation Team that was deployed into earthquakes, wildfires, avalanches, the worst disasters on Earth for the next several years. And they would set up innovation camps with teenagers to build robots and drones and do other kinds of real-time mapping of disaster response in those crisis situations. It was truly phenomenal work. And that was when Frank and I really got to know each other, was when he was doing that. So he was speaking in the context of bringing in simple technology and processes where kids become basically the superheroes. And so when Frank's connection is better, maybe we'll have another conversation. Looks like he just dropped off, which is unfortunate. So we'll see if his connection comes back, we can ask him to speak again. But what I'd love to do in the absence of that, while dealing with technical difficulties, Frank, are you back? Can we hear you again?
I switched to a different Wi-Fi system, so different network. So maybe, Comcast won't kill me.
Cool.
So,
All right, roll on.
so real quickly, after Hurricane Sandy, I helped up here with the Oso mudslide, and I deployed and what the product that I created was this, which is a 3D printed landscape of the terrain, which we could put maps onto. Then I created a solar powered video camera system that runs on Raspberry Pis that kids can build. I also built and designed motion sensors that kids build that we can deploy in the field to be able to look for additional earthquakes or landslides, lahars, that type of stuff, which is, since then, this was 10 years ago, since then I've worked on designing this stuff down to very small form factors, very small energy, and, have continued to refine this type of stuff and look, and I believe that we need to build this by building prototypes and engaging communities and doing that. And so that's kind of the pieces that I've been working on here with in Regenerate Cascadia. And I've talked with Brandon, and I'm going to be working on helping develop our disaster response guild, which is going to include a bunch of things. But my main focus really is on the art of tending at this point, because tending is how we actually regenerate things. It's the actual action of tending ourselves, our partners, our community, our kids, and that the act of tending is that action in which restores us and the environment. And so I have a whole bunch of stuff I've been trying to work on, but this is my main focus, is to really help support Regenerate Cascadia in this, and as part of that plan is to put the proposal together to build these tool sets out where we do have data governance, where the data is stored locally and shared appropriately by through security. I have this is what I've been doing for 10 years, and I also worked on my current big project is we have the Salish Sea Ecosystem Restoration Guild, which is a different type of guild than what Joe's been putting together. That been doing that, and we have 100 acres that we're learning how to tend, that is owned by the Tulalip tribes and supported by the Snohomish County Conservation District, so that we can do weekend camping and weekend tending and spending overnights throughout all the seasons to learn how we tend this 100 acres. And so that's another things that I've been supporting, along with building out the tool sets that we need to learn about how to restore. So I have access to great capabilities, and would love to find a way to have livelihood, as we talked about, while doing this work. Because right now it's I have to find livelihood, and then I have to find time to do this work, and it needs to be together, because that's the way this all should work. So I hope that I am one of the people that the community can help support, because I'm really ready to be supported and move and bring people along with me. So this is about building livelihoods for all of us, not just one person or everyone. So I'll be happy to answer questions and provide presentations or do whatever we can do to do that. And I'm going to be quiet now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank. I see Pat's got his hand up, so we'll go to him in a moment. I just want to name that when I first met Frank, he was having a crisis with one of his children born with some health challenges in a hospital. And his generosity was to redesign the way that families can navigate the healthcare system to help them in that health crisis. That's just the kind of generosity that Frank has. He's also wicked smart at databases and technologies, you can probably imagine. And I just wanted to name one thing related to what Frank was just saying before we go on to Pat, which is that if we really take regenerative finance seriously, what we're doing is creating flow to those who are supporting the creation of value in our communities. Notice how this is basically the opposite of what capitalism does. It's basically the opposite of what our extractive system does. So, so there's a lot of unlearning. And it's also hard to initially find where the support comes from, because you go looking at all the usual suspects that are visible. And so that's why it's so important for us to create support amongst each other, including things like what Frank was offering in the chat, which is, well, I can help you with the kids in Barichara to do some of this. We're like, heck yeah, we could do that. We can help each other directly. And so I just want to name that, like how important it is to claim our own sovereignty to do these things. So that's all I'll say for now. Then I'll pass it to Pat. And then I think because we need to be sure to end on time today for those who are going to start the session with Chris Steele in 15 minutes, then we'll go to Pat and then we'll start a closing. Okay, so Pat, over to you.
This is an incredible emotional moment. I can't believe, tending the wild, it's indigenous people living on the land, and it's focused on, with the land, and hearing Frank, I mean, this is an idea that we need to apply in so many different ways. So I'd like to hear more from Frank somewhere. I'd like to be in touch with him. Maybe talk to me more somewhere. How? I don't want to take any more time, but there's an explosion going on right now. This is an amazing. Anyway, tending. Holy cow, tending. Thank you.
So just going to say, anyone who can get within arm's reach should give Pat a hug. Really, so beautiful, the way that we're connecting with each other. What I wanted to name and just reminding us, like, what are these regenerative finance labs for? Or maybe to start clarifying what they're for. Yes, we want to learn about regenerative finance. We want to see real world examples to learn from the richness of what's going well and what isn't working. All of that's really important. But ultimately, we want to help each other do this better. We want to help each other. And this is so important. And so, so I want to name that part of what is happening with the work of the GeoPortal and Barichara is that, as many of you already know, I have been developing a framework for the Regenerative Education Fund in Barichara, where we're basically weaving together cooperation between multiple people and sites in our territory about regenerative education. Well, Natalia and I are working together to build a regenerative community fund for restoring the rivers. And this GeoPortal work is part of that. So even though we mostly talked about data and we talked about governance and decision-making, and we said, we're frustrated there's not money, but actually we're describing a regenerative finance system. We're describing the value flowing between relationships that enables us to restore our rivers. And that's the important insight. Because the key thing that was broken in the way I told the story, I said it intentionally. Reciprocity was absent, which means the key problem was not the absence of money. The key problem was the absence of right relationship. And that right relationship in this case includes who has the money, because you can't be in right relationship to bring a resource you don't have. But it's just emphasizing it's about right relationship. That's like so essential. And so if we can help cultivate right relationship, for one thing, we reduce our need for money. As Maria was saying, like, do you really need that money? Sounds like you have a lot going on. And Natalia said, well, we may be able to do some of this with less, but there's some things that still require money. And as Frank said, he's got to go work a day job and he can't just give his gifts because he's in a debt-based capitalist system that's really expensive. So without money to free him until we change that economic system, that he can't give his gifts. So how many of us could give our gifts if we were financially liberated? Maybe like 99% of humanity, right, would be able to give our gifts, right? So this is all related. And I just want to really emphasize it's all related. And as Frank described, coming into disasters, by the way, that avalanche, that landslide he mentioned, if I remember right, it was 162 people died. I don't remember the number, but basically some land came away was completely disastrous.
52 people perished and over 75 houses, structures.
This is something that happened in a moment in
It
Washington.
was over a mile wide debris area.
And so just to emphasize that usually landslides are caused by destruction of habitat. You know, it varies. There are different reasons. You go to California, it's mostly because people cut down forests and build houses in stupid places. I'm mostly talking about Southern California there. But, you know, natural disasters are probably the majority of them now are actually human-caused disasters. That's life in the Anthropocene. And that's certainly true. The rivers are dead in Barichara because of land use planning or land use, not planning, land use destruction. And so just naming the significance of coming into right relationship at all these levels, just how important that is. And then the other thing I want to name is that by articulating our stories to each other, we discover new ways of living our story. So it might turn out that someone on this call can help Natalia to move the geoportal forward, or it might be that someone that watches the recording of this can move that story forward. So basically, we start to live the story differently as we change the way we relate to each other. And I just want to name the significance of that. To say that even though it may be nothing obvious happens in this moment, but we're changing the way we relate to each other by actively living into the stories in a different way. And just to really emphasize that. And so all of this is about regenerative finance. And this is a laboratory because we're learning and practicing together. And so I see Claire has her hand up, and Claire, I just want to stress we need to be mindful to end a little early to be able to get to Chris, those of us who need to go to Chris Deal's session that starts in 8 minutes. But then I want to also welcome you to share. So
Yes.
welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to say that's very inspiring. And the Toronto, I can't remember what the name of it, the Regenerative Finance Forum, or the event that you had in the Greta Took Round, I thought was just such a brilliant way of story sharing, but with the people who are doing the that are also part of the funding ecosystem, that, you know, they have to hear those stories. I mean, what Frank, what you've just been sharing now, that to me, it's not so much thinking about an us and them with the funders, it's providing the opportunity for the funders to be in partnership with this vision. That is like, why would you be not creating the opportunity for the next stage of what we're trying to build together? So it's like creating the vision together. So anyway, I just wanted to say that video that was shared by like 2.5 hours, but it was just phenomenal. So yeah, I think that is a model that could be replicated everywhere, but really the story of place that brings up. So thanks.
Yeah, and for those who don't know what Claire's talking about, it's the GTB Bioregional Finance Summit. It's a 2-hour and 55-minute video where they compressed a 6-hour day into a little less than 3 hours. And you can find it in the Regenerative Finance Lab in the design school. And you will be sucked in for 3 hours because it's so good. Mm-hmm. And even though I spoke a little bit, so it's not all that great, but it's overall really good. And I see Marie had her hand up, and then Natalia wanted to say something, and we should probably end in about 3 minutes. So Marie, over to you, and then Natalia to bring us home.
Okay, a very quick one, because I was suddenly remembered that money is based on trust. That is, it's a promise to pay. And fiat currencies are called fiat because it's faith. We have faith in those currencies, and that's why they function. That's one thing I want to say. The other is attend. I've just been reading a whole book on ADD, ADHD, the whole epidemic of ADHD, and this is Gabor Mate. Dr. Gabor Mate says, the solution is to develop our attention, our capacity to attend.
Hear, hear. And can I get an amen? Natalia, is there anything you'd like to share in closing?
Yeah, just a little comment. I guess money is very important for moving forward some things, but I guess we all together can exchange different types of resources like knowledge, or if you want to come to Barichara and spend some time working holidays to support the technologies and the children, or the geoportal. Like we have very young environmental engineers leading the geoportal with not enough capacity to really move forward that and to really design a good geoportal with good communication sources. So it's not just money. I guess we are very powerful together, and we can do many things together that we can all enjoy and grow. So if you think you can support, or you have resources or technologies that can support the geoportal, or the technologies, the kids using technologies, is not just a matter of money. Sometimes we don't have the technical resources here in Latin America, or at least available, because they are making basic living for them. So very welcome. Very welcome if you think you have something to share or support, and I'm completely sure that you will enjoy staying here for a while.
Muchas gracias, Natalia. So yes, this is so beautiful, just bathing in the warmth of what's being shared here. I'm just going to name one thing about that young environmental engineer that Natalia is mentioning, is that Penny is with us largely because of Sergio. Sergio is this young man he's the most warm and loving engineer you'll ever meet. Like he's just so wonderful. And he stayed 2 full nights with Penny while she was in the hospital with dengue fever, and was just so sweet. He's gentle and warm and kind. And he's also really good at analysis and mapping. So, just saying, like, we need to thank our environmental engineers for things like Penny's help. Just wanted to add that to celebrate Sergio, who isn't here with us. But yeah, what a beautiful session today. Thank you everyone so much. And now Penny and I, at least, we're going to jump off and go to Chris Deal's session on very similar topics. And maybe we'll see some of you there. And if not, we'll see you very soon in other venues. So thank you all so much. What a beautiful conversation.
Thanks, everybody.